Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debut episode of The Breast There Is, The Breast There Was, and The Breast There Ever Will Be Wrestling Podcast. Seeing as how this is the first episode, there's lots for me to cover and explain. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mikey B, and I'd be happy to explain the title of my program to you all. Those individuals who clicked on this channel after simply reading the word breast in the title in the hopes of seeing videos of actual breasts on this program will be sadly disappointed. I encourage those viewers to simply refer to your regular pornographic websites. And so, why do I have the word breast in my title then, you ask? The breast is a nickname given to me by some friends of mine earlier in my life as a teenager, and the nickname has stuck to this day. Using the word breast in place of best is just a play on words. And whether or not you're familiar with the rest of my title, I think will determine if this is the right channel for you. As I mentioned in my introductory sentence, this is a professional wrestling review podcast, and this channel will be specifically dedicated to reviewing the programming of the WWE company, which stands for World Wrestling Entertainment. The title of my program, besides the pun, is a slogan by one of the greatest professional wrestlers that this company has ever employed, Bret the Hitman Hart. And now that I've introduced myself to you and explained the title of my program, the bigger question looming is, why should you good people listen to what I have to say about the WWE? That's an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked. I am what you might call a super fan of this company. And how does one qualify as a super fan then? To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. I mean, it's not as though there is a program of study for the history of the WWE, which one can attend and then after completion of these studies, graduate with honors and become certifiable as a super fan. It doesn't quite work this way. There is no clear definition of this. I do feel, though, that there are a set number of criteria that a person should likely possess in order to consider him or herself as a superfan. The first and most obvious one is to have watched a lot of the WWE programming over the years during different eras of the company's existence. This includes having knowledge of the company under its preceding name, the World Wrestling Federation, or for short, the WWF. As far as I'm concerned, two of the most popular and influential eras occurred under the former company's title. To me, these two eras, one being the infamous Attitude Era, and the other, for lack of a better title, I will refer to as the Hulkamania Era, are the two greatest periods of this company's history. I will discuss more on these eras later. The next criterion, which I believe is important for any person to be a superfan, is to not only have watched a lot of the programming over the years on television or on your computer, but to also have attended some live professional wrestling in your life. Note that I said some live professional wrestling and not specifically live WWE wrestling. This is not as critical as the first qualification, I must say, but still holds some importance. I fully understand that this can be difficult for many people depending not only on where you're living in the world, which can affect how accessible live wrestling is, but also how affordable it is to attend. I understand and recognize these points, which is why I would never declare this as a critical qualification. I do hope, though, for anyone like myself who truly loves this industry, that you somehow find a way to see some live professional wrestling in your life, even if it's not from the WWE company. There is certainly a different feeling, something unique about watching wrestling live compared to on a screen. The atmosphere is something to behold, and the energy is palpable when you're in the company of hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands, generally all there for the same purpose, which is to enjoy this together. It's also different watching wrestling without the ringside commentary that you get when you watch it on a screen, similar to the experience of watching many sports live instead of from a screen somewhere. In your seat, you find yourself leaning in a little more to watch every move and hold, engaging in a match in a way that you never have before. I've been fortunate over the years to have attended a number of marquee WWE events in my life, including some of the biggest shows which the company has ever produced. This I will also go into greater detail a little bit later on. The third qualification on my list to be considered a superfan is similar to the second one on my list in that it's not absolutely essential to have, but certainly is regarded as a nice bonus for any big-time wrestling fan, which is to have met some professional wrestlers or wrestling personalities in your life. I've had the great pleasure and great fortune to meet some of my favorites over the years, like Bret the Hitman Hart on two separate occasions, one of which was in his hometown of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Another included WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana, whom I met after winning a contest to have lunch with him at the tender age of 6, which occurred just days after WrestleMania 5. Yep, I'm not old. Others include Stone Cold Steve Austin, Chris Jericho, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, as well as one of the most respected commentators in the company's history, good old JR, Jim Ross. I must say that I'm pretty proud of that list, and I know some of you are probably thinking how lucky I am that I've had the opportunity to meet some of these people, and I wouldn't disagree. Many of them occurred in unexpected chance meetings, but a few of them, in the cases of Chris Jericho and Brutus the Barber Beefcake, I actively sought out at autograph sessions. I was even lucky enough to discuss wrestling with some of them, like Bret Hart, Chris Jericho, and definitely Tito Santana, whose ears I certainly talked off during that lunch session. The fourth and final qualification on my list, which is the most difficult to measure, is to have a strong understanding of the storytelling aspect of professional wrestling, or to have a high wrestling IQ. What I mean by this is if you have a strong understanding of the storytelling, you are able to determine, in most situations, how a story or a given match will unfold before it actually happens. Of course, I think it's impossible for anyone to be 100% correct all of the time, because after all, the stories and the outcomes are all determined and are subject to change by Vince McMahon and his creative team. And yes, this creative team does change their minds and their storytelling directions on the fly all the time. At least it's not certainly uncommon for them to do this. Now, I never have been and never will be a professional wrestler, nor have I ever set foot in a squared circle or worked on a creative team for any professional wrestling company. And unless you know someone personally who has, I'm confident in saying that I feel that you would be hard-pressed to find someone who understands professional wrestling and this company better than I do. A bold statement indeed. A bold statement which I'm happy to back up by proving my knowledge and worth to you good people. This leads me into my explanation as to how my wrestling review program will work, and more importantly, why you people should offer your time to me and listen. On this wrestling review show, I will definitely be putting my money where my mouth is by stating predictions for the outcomes of every match prior to a pay-per-view show. I will also not only simply select winners and losers, but also give a description of how I believe the outcome for each match may even unfold. That additional description portion would be difficult to grade, so for scorekeeping purposes, selecting the victor or victors for each match is the important thing to measure. You at home are welcome to keep track, as well as submit your own choices before each pay-per-view show, which would have to be sent out prior to the start time of each pay-per-view show. I do want to clarify that these predictions will not feature the pre-show matches. These pay-per-views I feel generally already drag on longer than they should, so I'm not grading or concerning myself with matches which the company deems unworthy of a spot on the main card. Now, besides this prediction show, which I will do prior to each pay-per-view, I also will be conducting a weekly show every Wednesday, which will feature my reviews and thoughts of the two primary weekly television shows of the WWE, which are Monday Night Raw and SmackDown Live. I want to also clarify that my show will not specialize in rumors of this company and its performers. I may speculate on events which may transpire in the story to individual wrestlers, but I will only do this as an educated guess, trusting my gut and not some rumor on a website. The two main reasons for this are that I don't want to make any foolish, uninformed judgment calls, as this may damage the credibility which I'm seeking to establish with my listeners. The other reason is that, at the end of the day, I'm still a fan of this company just like anyone else, and enjoy when the creative team does something surprising in the storyline and throws everybody off. I feel that there are times when they execute this well, and times when they execute this poorly. I'll certainly be monitoring that as the story unfolds. There are a lot of professional wrestling podcasts out there, and many even hosted by former or current wrestlers like the aforementioned Stone Cold Steve Austin and Chris Jericho. But what I feel will set mine apart is that it is not only from the perspective of a super fan like myself, but that I won't hesitate to speak honestly and candidly about the quality of the WWE and its performers, considering that I don't have any current or prior working relationship with this company. Sometimes while listening to shows or interviews by people who have an affiliation with the company, I feel like they sometimes bite their tongues on certain matters. This won't be a problem for me. I mentioned earlier that I've attended a number of specific marquee events of the WWE over the years, as well as some house shows. The specific marquee events which I have attended are Survivor Series 1991, Survivor Series 1999, as well as WrestleMania 18, otherwise known as WrestleMania X8, and then WrestleMania 23. Looking back at these events, I've been incredibly lucky to witness some historical moments at each one of these shows. Survivor Series 1991 marked the first championship victory by The Undertaker, which was over Hulk Hogan with a little help from Ric Flair, I might add. Survivor Series 1999 was significant because it featured the debut of new WWE Hall of Famer Kurt Angle. WrestleMania 23 featured a battle of the billionaires hair versus hair match between Vince McMahon and a certain current president of the United States who selected Umaga and Bobby Lashley to represent them in the match. And WrestleMania 18 featured the most important, story-altering match which I've ever seen. The Rock squared off against Hulk Hogan, known at that time as Hollywood Hulk Hogan, in an icon versus icon match. I know that I'm biased because I was in attendance for this match, but it really is one of the greatest matches in the history of this company. From a technical standpoint, it certainly wasn't any type of masterpiece, but the importance of it cannot be understated, which I will explain. It was easily one of the most raucous crowds for any match in this company's history. That point is indisputable. This match marked the first WrestleMania match for Hogan in 9 years, after headlining the first 9 of them. The story at the time had Hogan recently returning to the WWF as a heel character, meaning a bad guy. This, by the way, was the final WrestleMania of the WWF, and by many accounts, the final WrestleMania of the Attitude Era. He returned to the WWF along with his New World Order members known as the NWO, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. The NWO, for anyone who isn't aware, was a famous heel group in the WCW company, which stood for World Championship Wrestling. This company served as Vince McMahon's greatest competition and for many years had higher television ratings than the WWF. This WCW promotion was so popular that in fact the future of the WWF was in serious jeopardy. Fortunately for Vince McMahon and the WWF, they overtook WCW in popularity and eventually bought out the company and its entire catalog. As a result, many wrestlers who were employed by the WCW during this highly competitive time between the two companies, famously known as the Monday Night War years, were later acquired by the WWF. Vince McMahon seemed to seriously resent most of the newly acquired talent because it appeared that he took it as a personal attack from these performers that they were trying to destroy him and his company while employed with WCW. This was evidenced in the fact that he would choose for his longer-serving performers to oftentimes defeat most of the former WCW talent at important events like WrestleMania 18 and prevent them from getting ahead in his company. After all, unlike professional sports, where typically the most deserving competitors win the championships, the WWF WWE is a scripted wrestling program with predetermined outcomes. Whatever Vince and his creative team decides is what we get, and whomever they select as their designated champions, we all have to live with and can't do anything about, right? In most cases, this is absolutely true. But on this particular historic night at WrestleMania 18, during this particular historic match, everything changed. We, the fans, made our voices heard, and in doing so, helped change the direction that this company moved in. Now, for those listeners who haven't seen this match from WrestleMania 18 between The Rock and Hollywood Hulk Hogan, I fully understand if you wish to pause my show and go and Google this match and watch it immediately. I would do the same if I hadn't seen this either. I also will be discussing this match in detail, so I am issuing a spoiler alert for those individuals. Now, as I mentioned, entering his first match upon his return to the company, Hollywood Hulk Hogan was being characterized as a real big-time heel character. Meanwhile, The Rock was certainly at the peak of his popularity as a wrestler. This match was certainly shaping up as a classic heel versus babyface match. A babyface, for those who don't know, is a term used for a good guy character or fan favorite. Heading into WrestleMania 18 at the Skydome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, I was giddy at the fact that I was about to watch two bona fide wrestling legends representing two different eras of this great company square off at the biggest wrestling event in the world. And even though I had a love of each wrestler at different points in their careers, heading to the event, it seemed almost like a certainty that The Rock would prevail on this night. He was pretty much the face of the company at that point, and the company certainly anticipated him being a full-time performer for many years to come. This fact, coupled with Hogan returning to the company as a much older heel character, not to mention his most recent employer being the much despised WCW, made this outcome a no-brainer for me. And I was okay with this expected outcome, as it made the most sense to me. I still planned on cheering for both guys and was hoping for a solid match. Then I noticed something interesting happening as I arrived at the stadium. At the gate which I was entering, where hundreds of people were lining up, all I heard in the crowd were chants of, "Hogan, Hogan, Hogan." I thought to myself, oh wow, Hulk Hogan has some support here. A few hours later, when the match got underway, I realized that my observation couldn't have been a greater understatement. Hulk Hogan returned to WrestleMania in true hero fashion. Every single thing he did in the match was met with hysterical applause, and much to my surprise, nearly every single thing that The Rock did was met with resounding boos. I want to assure my listeners that I was not among the people booing him. Even at a point in the match when The Rock placed Hulk Hogan in the sharpshooter submission hold, which is famous in wrestling as being the finishing maneuver of arguably the greatest Canadian wrestler of all time, Bret the Hitman Hart, he was still met with huge boos. The high point in the match for me has to be when Hulk Hogan hulked up and we in the crowd went absolutely bananas. It still gives me goosebumps every time I watch it. As I expected, The Rock did wind up prevailing in the end, but our voices were impossible to ignore. Our overwhelming reaction to Hogan's return sparked a frenzy in the WWF universe for a Hulk Hogan nostalgia run. This is how I know that we changed the direction of the story. After the match, Hogan and The Rock shook hands out of respect, which is a great gesture given the magnitude of the match. The other members of the NWO then came down to the ring to confront Hogan and attack him. This resulted in The Rock helping to defend Hogan from this onslaught. This action signified the end of the NWO, which, as we soon saw afterwards, also signified Hogan's turn from a heel back to a babyface. After Hogan and The Rock successfully defended the attack from the other NWO members, they then proceeded to share the ring a little bit longer, posing for the crowd to more cheers. There are a few key events which happened soon afterwards which confirm my belief that the storyline changed at that precise moment. On that same night at WrestleMania 18, in the final match of the night, Chris Jericho dropped the championship to Triple H. Now, for those who know little or nothing about Triple H, which stands for Hunter Hearst Helmsley, real name being Paul Levesque, this guy plays a very critical role in the direction of this company. In real life, Triple H is married to Vince McMahon's daughter Stephanie, and at the time of WrestleMania 18, he was already dating her for quite a while, behind the scenes, mind you. And so, being in such good graces with the head of the company, of course, it's not surprising that the company did a lot to promote and push Triple H as one of their most important wrestlers for many years to come, even if he didn't deserve it, which is the feeling of many fans, including myself. Now, getting back to this night, before Triple H won the championship, he had a few months prior returned from a knee injury to great fanfare. In retrospect, the company hyped up his return possibly more than any other return I can remember. This big return soon resulted in him winning the Royal Rumble match, granting him the title shot at WrestleMania 18. Following his title victory, this is where I'm confident in saying that our reaction to Hogan changed the story. After such a grandiose return to prominence following his injury, and being in the bosom of the head of the company, we could all have anticipated a lengthy title run for Triple H. Instead, at the following pay-per-view event, Triple H faced off against Hulk Hogan, who was riding his huge nostalgia wave, and dropped the title to Hogan. It was very gratifying because this confirmed my belief, and it demonstrated how the fans can make a significant difference in this story. And make no mistake, we, the WrestleMania 18 fans, started this huge wave which culminated in Hogan's short but very sweet nostalgic title run at the top of the company once more. This Hogan Rock match truly was a special one-of-a-kind moment. It contained the kind of magic that I believe appeals to all of us wrestling fans, and is a big reason why we watch it. We wrestling fans live for these kinds of moments, and being a part of this crowd which changed the course of the story is a big reason why I created this podcast. I want to not only educate and inform my listening audience about past moments and figures of this company, but I also hope to influence and impact my listeners with my ideas in an attempt to improve the storytelling of this company. I do believe that my listeners and I can collectively make an impact and make our voices heard. This is my ultimate goal of this podcast. I also have no misconceptions about any success of this podcast without my audience. You people are certainly my lifeline for this. And this is why I'm also encouraging my listeners to post any questions you may have for me in the comments section. I will make sure to address any respectful questions at the end of each show on Wednesday. Well, I think that about covers everything for my introduction. I want to thank my listeners for your time and certainly would appreciate it if any of you good people would choose to subscribe to my channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.